If you've ever wondered why having more doesn't make people happy, I want to tell you a story. There's an old story about a king who was known for his wealth. And one day a beggar came to the palace gates and held out a bowl. The king looked at him and said, "What do you want?" And the beggar said, "Only to fill my bowl." The king laughed, because to him, that was nothing. He had rooms filled with gold, jewels, silk, treasures from every corner of the kingdom. And so he told his servants, "Fill the man's bowl with gold." They poured in a handful, but the gold disappeared. And so they poured in another handful, and that disappeared too. The king leaned forward. "Fill it again." And they brought more, and they filled more. No matter how much they poured into the bowl, it never filled. The king's amusement turned into confusion. His confusion turned to frustration. And they emptied entire rooms of treasure, filling this beggar's small bowl, still empty. Finally, the king looked at the beggar and said, "What's this bowl made of?" And the beggar said, "It's made from human desire, and that's why it can never be filled. Because the moment it receives one thing, it wants another. More gold, more praise, more attention." I think about this story a lot because sometimes the emptiness that we feel isn't because life has given us nothing. Sometimes it's because the mind has forgotten how to receive what's already here. That is what gratitude restores. Not by making you want less, but by helping you feel the life you already have. The love, the people who stayed in your life, the ordinary moments that once you prayed for, because an ungrateful mind can turn abundance into emptiness. But a grateful heart can turn an ordinary life into treasure. Gratitude doesn't make your life smaller. It helps you to realize that your life was already full. If you ever felt like you were waiting for your next chapter to finally enjoy your life, I want to tell you a story. Once a businessman was vacationing in a small fishing village, and one day, he sees a fisherman pulling his boat into shore. Inside the boat were a few beautiful fish, and the businessman said, "That's incredible. How long did it take you to catch them?" And the fisherman said, "Not long." Then the businessman asked, "Then why didn't you stay out longer and catch more?" And the fisherman said, "Because I've had enough." The businessman looked confused. He said, "But if you stayed out longer, you could catch more fish. You could sell them. Eventually you could buy a bigger boat. You could buy a whole fleet of boats." The fisherman listened. The businessman kept going. He said, "You could build a company. You could move to the city. You could become rich. And one day, you could retire." The fisherman looked at him and asked, "And then what?" And the businessman said, "You could move to a quiet village by the sea. You could sleep late. You could fish a little. You could spend time with your family. You could eat with your friends and enjoy your life." And the fisherman looked at him and said, "But that's what I already do." I think about this story a lot because it's so easy to think that joy is somewhere ahead of us, after the next goal, after life looks a little more like the picture we had in our mind. And maybe that's why the fisherman's answer is so unsettling, because he's stopping to ask a question that many of us forget to ask. What am I hoping that this will give me? Is any piece of that already here? A slower morning, a meal with the people I love, a moment where I get to be here without rushing to the next thing. And maybe gratitude isn't a command for us to want less. Maybe it's just an invitation for us to notice more, to stop long enough to recognize the pieces of peace that are already touching our lives. Because sometimes the life that we're trying so hard to build is already showing up in the life that we have. And maybe the real question is not only, what do I want next? Maybe it's also, what's already in my life right now that I don't want to miss? If you've ever replayed a decision in your mind and you wondered if you chose wrong, I want to tell you a story. In the late 1800s, a Japanese lighthouse keeper lived on a tiny island with his wife. And every night his job was simple: keep the lighthouse burning. Because somewhere out on that dark ocean, ships were depending on that light, even if he couldn't see them. Then one winter, a violent storm arrived, and the waves destroyed a narrow bridge connecting the lighthouse to the small house where his wife was sheltering. Suddenly, he was trapped in the lighthouse, and she was trapped outside. He could see what was happening, but he couldn't reach her. So he had to face an impossible choice. If he abandoned the lighthouse, the light would go out, and hundreds of sailors navigating those rocks in the storm could lose their lives. But if he stayed, he would lose the person he loved the most. So he stayed. He kept the light burning. His wife lost her life that night. The sailors did not. Most people hear this story and think, what would I have done? But I think that there's a deeper question. How many of us are still carrying guilt because we believe that there must have been a perfect decision in our lives? That if we'd only chosen differently, everyone would have been okay. But life doesn't always give us choices between right and wrong. Sometimes it gives us two things that we desperately want to both save. And no matter what we choose, something precious is lost. That's the kind of decision that people replay for years. If only I should have. Maybe the thing that keeps us stuck isn't the decision itself. It's the belief that there was a version of a decision where no one would get hurt. And that version didn't exist. Sometimes you just made the best decision with all of the information, the strength, and the circumstances that you had. That is a very different thing from making the wrong decision. So if you've been carrying guilt for an impossible choice, consider this. You might not be grieving a mistake. You may be grieving the fact that sometimes life asks us to choose when there was never going to be a perfect answer. And recognizing that, while it doesn't erase the pain, can finally release you from carrying blame that wasn't yours. If you've ever had a problem that was so big, it felt like it consumed your entire life, I want to tell you a story. A teacher once had a student who came to him overwhelmed by suffering. The student said, "My life feels unbearable." But the teacher didn't offer him advice, and he didn't try to cheer him up. Instead, he took a glass of water and put a handful of salt in, and he stirred it quietly. Then he handed it to the student. "Drink." The student took one sip and immediately spit it out. "It's awful. It's too bitter." The teacher nodded. Then he took the student outside, and they walked to a quiet lake. The teacher took another handful of salt and scattered it into the water, the same amount. Then he filled a cup from the lake and handed it to the student. "Drink," he said, and the student did. "How does it taste?" "Fresh." The teacher smiled. The salt was still there. The only thing that changed was the size of the water. I think about this story a lot because most of us spend so much of our lives thinking, how do I get rid of the salt, the disappointment, the grief, the fear, the regret? But some of life's pain can't be removed. Maybe the better question is, how do we make the water bigger? Because pain has a way of making our whole world feel small. It tells us the heartbreak is all there is. The fear is all there is. But gratitude quietly reminds us to look again. The person who loves you, the meal on your table, the breath in your lungs, the tree outside your window, the sky putting out another sunset. None of those things remove the salt, but every one of them makes the lake a little deeper, until one day the pain that once filled your entire world becomes only a small part of a beautiful life that had been there all along. Because gratitude doesn't remove the salt. It reminds you that your pain may fit in a cup, but your life never will. If you've ever felt like the world could never possibly understand what you're going through, I want to tell you a story. There's an old story of a woman who just lost her little boy, and she couldn't accept that he was gone. She searched everywhere asking if anyone could help, and finally someone sent her to an old man. He listened to her, and he said, "I want you to do one thing. Bring me a handful of seeds from a home that's never experienced loss." She left immediately. The first house had mustard seeds, but when she explained why she needed them, the woman said, "We buried my father." So she thanked her and went on to the next house. They had mustard seeds too, but they said, "But we lost our daughter." The next door, "My husband." The next, "My brother." The next, "My mother." Hour after hour she kept knocking. Different families, different stories, the same answer. At sunset she returned without a single mustard seed. And at first that might sound like the story's tragedy, but I don't think it is. I think the real story is what happened between the doors. Imagine it. She walked through her village believing she was carrying a grief that no one else could understand. Then with every knock, her world became just a little different. Not because her pain disappeared, but because every ordinary home turned out to have heartbreak of its own. The strange thing is, nothing about those houses gave it away. People were cooking, people were talking, children were playing. From the outside, they all looked perfectly ordinary. And maybe that's still true today, because every day we pass hundreds of people whose hardest day is completely invisible to us. The stranger who seems impatient, the coworker who seems distant, the person who never smiles. We see a moment, but never the chapters that came before it. Maybe that's the quiet lesson hidden inside this old story. Not that loss is universal. Most of us already know that. It's that every ordinary life is deeper than it appears. She thought that grief was the path that she walked alone, but it quietly introduced her to every human heart she'd ever meet. Maybe that's why this story survived for thousands of years. Because every one of us has eventually discovered that the thing that makes us feel most alone is often the thing that connects us to everyone else.